Good morning. My name is Steve Lamont, and I serve as the chair of the South Orange County Economic Coalition, as well as the executive officer for the Building Industry Association of Southern California, Orange County chapter. For more than 5 decades, the South Orange County Economic Coalition has served as the premier voice of business throughout South Orange County. We promote a strong economic climate and provide updates on current events impacting our region and local businesses. Thank you for joining us today for a virtual membership meeting, a public forum on housing in South Orange County. I am pleased to be your moderator today. Housing, whether it is the need for affordable housing, attainable housing, the new rules and regulations coming down from the state, or the need for permanent supportive housing for the homeless, home building seems to be on the front burner more than ever. Today, we are going to hear from the builders and landowners themselves in hopes of understanding what it takes to build a home, what the future may look like, and why are we in a housing crisis. Joining us today will be Dave Bartlett, Vice President of Land Entitlement for Brookfield Residential, Eric Nelson, Vice President of Community Development for Trumark Homes, Mike Balsamo, Senior Vice President, Rancho Mission Viejo, and Laura Archuleta, President and CEO of Jamboree Housing. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to jump right into it and hear from the panelists themselves on really what does your company do? Give us a snapshot. Where are you building? Talk about any future or recent projects that you'd like to share. I got my list here, so we're going to start with Dave. We're going to go Dave, Eric, Mike, and then save the best for last with Laura. So Dave, over to you.
Thank you, Steve. We are currently building all over Southern California, Riverside County, a couple of master plans there. In the Baldy View area, Ontario, a big master plan there called New Haven. The Ontario Ranch area is now the 5th best selling master plan community in the country. So a lot of momentum out in that part of the IE. And then of course we're building in Orange County as well. So we're well. Our geographic footprint aligns well with Southern California.
Outstanding. Thank you. Eric.
Yeah, hi, Steve. So Trumark Homes we're building throughout the state of California. We have a local office here in Southern California, which is where I'm out of, and then we also have a Northern California office. Our main focus is infill development, really looking at emerging markets and doing a lot of recycling of land as opposed to greenfield development. But we do also have, several large master plans, not only locally here in Southern California, but also in Northern California. And we build everything from detached single-family homes to high-rise towers.
Outstanding. Awesome. Thank you. So Mike, our landowner.
Yes, nice to be here, Steve. Rancho Mission Viejo, we've got a 50-year history here in Orange County. And the good fortune for me is that we are located in one jurisdiction with the County of Orange. We're underway with a 23,000-acre master plan, greenfield development. Many of you know some of our past master plan communities that included Mission Viejo, Rancho Santa Margarita, Ladera Ranch, and most recently we've developed Sendero and Esencia within Rancho Mission Viejo. I'm excited to say that we're getting closer now to the opening of our next village, which will be called Rienda, and looking to open that in early 2022.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And Laura, our affordable housing builder.
Great. Thank you. Yes. Jamboree Housing Corporation is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are dedicated to providing housing that's currently not being met by the marketplace. So lower income housing for folks who might be coming from homeless all the way up to about 60% of the area median income. We develop statewide, and we have about 12 developments under construction right now, everywhere from a pre-development activities on a new one down in San Juan Capistrano up to several developments in Anaheim. And then we have a Sacramento hub, Inland Empire, and San Diego. So along with our developments come a full range of resident services for those who need it. And we are headquartered right here in Irvine, California.
Very good. Well, excited to hear about the South County development maybe a little bit later. But what we're going to do is we're going to jump into some of these questions. We're going to try to talk about housing stock availability, affordability, attainability, and really get a big picture on housing. So let's just jump right into it. I think it's no secret at all that we are in a housing crisis. I got some data here, but the estimated shortage in the state of California is about 3 to 4 million units. In Orange County, that number is about 60,000 units. So that's a shortage of 60,000 units. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of a lightning round here. I'm going to ask the panelists, how did we get here, and how do we get out? And I'm assuming that question might be build more housing, but there's a lot more that goes on into it. And so we're going to start with Dave.
All right, I'll take a shot at that. First of all, we can start by just keeping up with demand. We need about 180,000 permits per year for that. And the last time we had consecutive runs was in the 2002, 3, 4, and 5 timeframe. So in Orange County, the big ranches, Irvine Ranch, Rancho Mission Viejo, Talega, they have been great outlets, and Mike Balsamo and R&V will continue to be a great outlet, but it's a different story today. Those ranches have run out of units. A lot of them have, or they're dwindling down. And so, how do we get out? I think we have to find alignment. We have to work with our local agencies, and if there could be state legislation that could be contemplated. One thought is, for these refill and infill developments where you're simply replacing FAR with FAR, maybe there's just an exemption for 150 units or less, CEQA exemption, so you can go right to a tentative map. But there needs to be a few tools that the local cities can put in their toolbox in order to keep up with that demand.
Good. Okay, Eric.
Yeah, how did we get here, guys? Such a nuanced question, but what I would say is, we're here for a number of reasons. I think one is that we started, in 08 with a crisis, a different kind of crisis, and I think we're reliving, some of the other side of that now as builders, and a hesitancy to overbuild because nobody wants to end up in that situation. But I don't think that's the reason we have this statewide crisis. Housing and housing demand is not linear. It's not a straight line. It's it's driven from a bunch of different sources, everything from interest rates to the economy. And so, trying to just plan for housing and put a lump sum number to it, I think is always going to be a tricky bet. But on top of all that, what we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is sort of this growing list of poorly conceived policies and regulations that drive up housing costs, not only for market rate developers like myself, but for affordable developers as well. I mean, if it costs me $100 a square foot, it's going to cost them at least that much too. And so, a lot of our crisis is sort of self-made. It's, I think Dave touched on one point, that we're not building enough. And when supply and demand aren't met, or supply isn't met with demand, you end up seeing price increases. And you see it today. The housing market is on fire, and it's on fire because we have a very limited supply of available new homes as well as new apartments. And, that's pushing numbers, again, up to a record level. And I don't think any builder out there, wants to see housing prices get so far out of whack that we can't find buyers. And we're headed in that direction if we don't do something.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Mike Balsamo.
Well, I would say it's taken decades to get to where we are in terms of this housing crisis. And there have been any number of issues over the years that have contributed to the limited supply that Dave mentioned. A couple decades ago, traffic was all anybody talked about as a reason to stop development. Water supply has been used as a reason to stop development. More recently, the climate change issue has become the focus of trying to limit or stop development. And then I think lastly too, there is a desire among many to preserve open space to some degree and to save quality of life in our region. And I know that's something important to the company that I work for. I think going forward and looking towards solutions, when each of those issues has been approached on a very siloed or single focus agenda. So whether it's the state legislature or a local city or the county, they're all trying to solve for those specific issues with each project. I think what we have to do is kind of turn the whole issue around and make housing be the highest priority. Make sure that there's consideration for the needs of people and continuing to provide a thriving economy, for the next generation of Southern Californians. So you really do have to have people thinking collectively for the collective good, not just for what you don't want next door. So thank you.
Well put. Laura.
Yeah, I think that housing is often looked at as the number one way to build wealth for middle income families. And so when you look at it as a wealth builder rather than a home to live in, you make different choices and you have different concerns. You have concerns about what's going to happen with that wealth that you're building. And so I think it's time that we really get back and look at what is the importance of having a house, safe, high quality housing. And we see it during the pandemic, right? We see the importance of housing and getting people off of the streets, getting people out of overcrowded units. And to look at housing as housing, not as a wealth building vehicle. So I think that is one way in which maybe we could kind of adjust our lens of how we look at housing. And maybe that would help get more housing units built. On top of that is I do believe that everybody in our communities look at housing as the bad guy, as housing's bringing the people or causing the impacts, causing the traffic. But the reality is the people are here. We're just not keeping up with that demand. And you see that in overcrowded neighborhoods, overcrowded apartments and whatnot. So all of those things together hopefully will lead us to make better decisions about producing more housing.
So Dave brought up a point that I want to maybe do a pop quiz here for the panel, but the governor wants to see 3.5 million units before 2025, which is kind of to Dave's point, that's 500,000 units a year, if I'm doing my math correctly. And so I guess my question to this group is, when was the last time California has ever done 500,000 units in 1 year? And I'll start with Dave.
I don't think it's ever been done. I can tell you that I think the peak was around 275,000 units back several years ago. This past year, the current data has just been reported. We're at 100,000 permits for 2020. Probably that could have been a little bit more because the builders did take a pause. I mean, I think collectively, all of us on this call probably stopped for maybe 2 months, maybe 3, because we didn't know really where this was going. And then once we got started again, it just took off, and now we all have very generous backlogs going into 2021. And so I think it goes back to, if we can just keep up with demand and get to that 180,000 permits a year statewide, well, that's a victory. I don't think we're ever going to get to 500, but if we can keep up with demand and move in that direction, then I think we'd have to say to ourselves, I think we're making progress.
Yeah, good. Eric, what is your answer?
Well, I actually don't know the permit, numbers. It sounds like Dave's the authority on, what got built and when. But, the idea that we're going to ever be able to get anywhere near what's being asked of us, I think is doesn't look at the facts. Yeah. When we're not allowed to go out, into the Inland Empire and further out from many areas due to some of the new regulations that came down with VMT analysis, sort of limiting development on the edges, which, I would argue could be a good thing. But, those constraints put a lot of pressure on, the infill developments, which are usually harder and take longer to, get through the process. So, it'd be great to see, even in Orange County, that we get close to what we need. But I'm definitely, I don't see how we do it. And I hate to be sort of this Debbie Downer, I'm really, think that there's a lot of opportunity. But like Mike said, it's really going to take a collective effort from all sides.
So Mike, 500,000 units, has it ever been done before?
I don't think so. I could just give you, maybe a corollary example for Orange County. I think in the 1980s, we were building roughly 25,000 homes a year during the heyday of Orange County, during its most significant growth period. I mean, now in Orange County, in a decent year, you'll see maybe 5,000 single-family homes built, maybe 3,000 to 4,000 multifamily units built. So, we're maybe a third of where we were in the peak time at best. So it's hard to envision that kind of volume coming back, given the land constraints that we have today. There are some things that are give cause for hope, though. I think part of the pandemic here has shown how technology has enabled people to work remotely, to kind of suit their own schedule as how they get their job done. And it doesn't apply to everybody, because we know folks in the service sector are really struggling. But there is the potential down the line that fewer people will need to get on the road for a typical commute, and we may be able to provide housing, in locations we hadn't thought of before, without the traffic factor being an issue. Maybe not as significant of an issue as it was years ago. So it's just something to think about for the future.
Okay. All right, Laura, really quick, 500,000 units, have we ever done it?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one, but I do think that during the maybe 50s and 60s, there was more housing being produced. That would be my guess, but I don't know.
You guys, the answer is it's never been done. And the data that I am looking at from the California Department of Housing and Community Development states that in 86 and in 19, it looks like 63, we were just over 300,000 units in the state of California in terms of production. So my point is that it is a tall order to reach the amount of units that the state of California would like us to reach. And so that was, this will sort of lead me into one of my next questions. And we have a lot here. And so the average cost to build a home in the US is $240,000. In San Francisco, it costs about $750,000 just to build a 2-bedroom apartment. And so why so unaffordable? And, kind of, again, back to the regulations and the cost, why is it so expensive to build the home? I'm gonna go to Dave here. If you could respond maybe with some of the development styles that you're doing out in the Inland Empire, and maybe with Eric, we can talk about a little bit of the high rises. But what are some of the biggest costs to build a home?
Well, it all starts with the land. So, if your land's really expensive, your housing's probably going to follow. And so you need to be able to make appropriate land deals. And I think the expectations, in the Inland Empire have been set, because it is an affordable or an attainable outlet, we're finding, right? And so we are looking at our cost basis out there of being fairly reasonable. And as a result, we're able to produce, for sale housing that is in the mid 3s to low 4s and upwards of there. So, creating some good quality home communities and neighborhoods that that have associated lifestyle considerations and parks and clubhouses and amenities. So delivering that type of an offering, I believe, is really kind of what people are still looking for when we talk about attainability. It's not just a studio in a great location, but it's about having these other amenities nearby. So I could go on and on and on about about cost, but really it just kind of all boils down to the land.
Yeah, good answer, Eric.
Yeah, so I would absolutely agree with Dave. I mean, land is the driving force behind costs for the type of projects that the majority of us are looking at today. And I know you mentioned high-rise, Steve. The interesting thing is when you start to look at vertical high-rise construction, the land starts to become less and less important because construction costs rise with density.
Yep.
And we see that even, on smaller density projects like, 20 to 30 units to the acre, costs start to go up almost tenfold as you get above a certain density. Yeah. And, it's definitely lost, I think, on some, that the idea of density is our solution, because it isn't. It's one solution. I think, I see this housing, the situation we're in is there's a multitude of things that could change. There's no silver bullet, but land definitely is, one of the most extremely expensive components of housing development in Southern California.
Okay, thank you. Mike.
Well, I just have to acknowledge what my co-panelists have said. I mean, land is a market dynamic, just like anything else. Supply and demand is the issue. There are really only a handful of master plan communities remaining to be built in California today. I mean, there are some significant ones, but very limited opportunities for greenfield development in the state of California. So yes, naturally land prices are going to be higher. I think the other factor that doesn't get talked about as much is infrastructure cost.
Yep.
And, the state does the best they can. The local governments do the best they can to partner with the building community. But when you get right down to it, it's generally speaking the private sector that has to do heavy lifting of getting infrastructure in place, whether that be sewer and water or roads or schools or parks or wireless technology. All of these things have to be coordinated and have to be placed in a community in advance to be able to accommodate housing. And occasionally you can find grant money, from state and regional sources, but it isn't really the full amount that you would need to provide these kind of communities. So, infrastructure costs will continue to be a factor in the cost of housing here.
Thank you. And Laura, I think this question will resonate with the audience coming from you specifically, because you are the one to build housing that is affordable housing, if you will. And so there's been, as I stated earlier, but numerous articles on the cost to build affordable housing and how expensive it is. And so I guess, why is that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, absolutely there's the land cost, and my fellow panelists have talked about that. The nice part about land is that our city partners do have the opportunity to zone more land, right? So the more land you zone, hopefully that will impact the price. But in affordable housing specifically, each of our developments have 5 to 7 layers of funding. And in a recent Turner study released up at Berkeley, they found that each layer of funding costs about $7,000 per unit by the time you get it. So if you have a seven layers of funding at $7,000 per layer, you're just adding that, $50,000 a unit or so onto each unit, just because of all of the affordable financing and the complexity of it, and all the, of course, the attorneys involved and everybody else. So that's a piece of it. On top of it is in affordable housing, we often get the less desirable sites to build on. So we may have kind of funky designs. We may have environmental issues that have to be cleaned up. It may take more community outreach and longer time. So, it could take us 10 years to build one development, like it did right here in Brea, where we did a lot of community outreach. And then I would just say about half of what we develop requires prevailing wage, sometimes a project labor agreement, and good or bad, it just does cost more.
Very informative. Now, we talked about sort of the bigger picture of housing, why we're in this housing crisis, talked a little bit about the cost to build. Now, I do want to go one more layer and talk about regulation. And I would love it if you guys could share either one of the craziest regulations or policies, whether it's at the local level or state level, that is a hindrance or a major challenge to creating units, or just in general, one of the biggest challenges that you face when trying to create a roof, a housing unit. And then I swear right after this, we're going to get into some of the positives that local jurisdictions in the state are doing to try to create housing units. But with that, Dave, really quick.
Okay, I'm going to not name the city in this particular example, but we had a situation where we had an average 1,342 square foot condominium, and the particular city was trying to charge us a development impact fees of $100,000 per unit. And so, my response to that was, that's a little bit ridiculous. I'll pay my fair share on a per square foot basis, but $100,000 on a house that was going to cost $500,000, it really. Now we ended up working out a compromise on that, so it worked out in everybody's favor. But I think we just all have to be careful and work with our agency partners and making sure that the fees are appropriate, seeing what they can do to defer those fees to, say, certificate of occupancy. That's helpful. So that's one example, Steve.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Eric. I hope you're going to say the public art fee, but
that's definitely one of them. But frankly, that's usually fairly easy to address. It's a small cost in most cities. What I would say though is, I can't name any one jurisdiction that has anything that's crazy. I mean, I think each one has a unique nature to it. And in Orange County, that's 33 different cities with 33 different sets of rules, as well as different fees, which from a builder's perspective makes it a little tricky. But what I would tell you is where I spend a lot of my time in our design stages is where are we going to put trash cans and cars? Because those are the things that get in the way of development, unfortunately. And it's not uncommon to see a planning commission or a city council come back on a project and ask for more parking, even though you meet the standards, because of the public outcry and some fear that there's not going to be enough parking. And at the same time, we're really wrestling with trying to find more rooftops for people to sleep under. We're putting our cars in enclosed garages and doing things I think are all, where we have opportunities as well. So that's what I would say are, some of the more challenging things to deal with on a daily basis.
Good. Mike, same question to you.
Well, similar to the others, I wouldn't call out a specific agency or something like that, but I will say this, dealing with the big investor-owned utility, the dry utilities, electrical, et cetera, in California, those folks are in their own situation right now where they've got a crisis. So they've got other challenges to their business operation that they have to deal with that are important things that make new community development sort of a secondary or third tier priority for them. So when you're dealing with a state level agency, it's tough to sometimes get their attention, and you have to plan ahead for the time involved. In our case, we had to build a new power line. We had to establish a new easement with our provider down in just east of San Juan Capistrano. You're talking about a multi-year process that has to go all the way to the California Public Utilities Commission. And if you're not on your game, you will find yourself behind schedule very quickly in these situations. And so the other factor I just mentioned is getting the agencies to understand that there are different priorities for different things. You have to have sometimes where water districts got to cooperate with the county or a city, for example, and sometimes they're focused on their own individual mission. But part of our job in our business is to try to get everybody to work together. So those are some of the challenges.
Good, thank you, and to you, Laura.
Sure, yeah. So I'm surprised. We're building housing for people on average who are earning about $26,000 a year. And our cities are often requiring us, because we go through so much design review and community meetings and outreach, and they might be putting money in, is that they're requiring sometimes higher finishes than our market rate counterparts. So 20 years ago, this happened down in Talega, where we built one of the first large family developments here in Orange County. And we often will have people come over to try to rent our units who are looking for the market rate development that's across the street. They think that's the affordable development. And it most recently happened in North Orange County City, where they required stone on the outside of a building, where our market rate counterparts were not doing that across the street, but they could place those requirements on the affordable housing. And in this case, they were not putting money into this development. It was receiving a density bonus. We were receiving funding from the state, but it just surprises me that the over concern, right, about who's going to live there. So let's kind of over design it.
Wow, very good point. And so I did say we are going to focus a little bit on the positives, and I'm gonna switch it around and start with Laura here. But whether, Laura, you, Mike, Dave, and Eric, you guys are all involved, even at the state level, when it comes to housing policy. And of course, you're experts here, even at the local level. But what jurisdictions are doing it right, and why are they doing it right? And what would you? And we're running out of time, so I'm going to kind of rope this in as well. But if you could make one recommendation to an elected official, both local and state, what would it be?
Yeah. So what's incredible is so many new elected officials have been coming forward and are supporting affordable housing. I think I'm running a little bit slow on here, so hopefully you're getting it. But these new local elected officials are coming forward. They support affordable housing. They want to know how housing can be built. And so I think we will be seeing more housing built. One of the programs that I believe is extremely successful will be the Project Home Key, which is being run out of the state, but we're partnering with our local counties to acquire motels and turn those into permanent supportive housing. So when you get an allocation of Home Key funding, what comes along with that funding is actually a CEQA and entitlement. Entitlements come along with that. And so it's a good way to prove out this partnership with the state to try to get more housing produced
Awesome.
quickly.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go Mike, Eric, and then Dave. Mike, to you, jurisdictions that are doing it right, and if you can make one recommendation to a local or state elected on how to create more units.
Okay. Well, I have to say the county, that's who we work with the most. And, we have a 50-year track record of working with the County of Orange, led by Lisa Bartlett, supervisor of the 5th District. The county takes a regional view. They are, not as shy as maybe other public agencies might be about embracing the struggles that come with growth and dealing with them head on, planning for them, advancing infrastructure ahead of development, doing all the right things. Having a good partner like that, we're able to provide, a full service community that provides attainable housing at all levels, but also has the civic uses and, the full spectrum of activity that people enjoy in South Orange County. So, as far as elected officials and advice, number one would be to be transparent, and it's an overused word, but early in the process, you've got to take on the folks in the community who won't be happy with the project. There's no hiding. And anytime people try to do that, it ends up in a disastrous situation. I think whenever you've got an issue of public controversy and they come along now and then, you've got to communicate early with the folks that are impacted, and there's no other way to do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Eric.
There's a lot of great cities out there in Orange County. I would stay focused here because we're in South Orange County. Talk about a few that I think are just hitting out of the park. At least my experience, one of that is Mission Viejo. We brought a project forward early this year, right at the beginning. In fact, I submitted the day before we went into lockdown, and that project went through a full CEQA review and a full city council approval within 6 months. It was 91 units. The city participated by helping us deal with some land constraints and sold off a piece of property that they had rights to. And it was one of those perfect projects that's going to be some of the most attainable housing in South Orange County built, in the near future. And then certainly a shout out to my city, Dana Point, who, Coastal Commission as well, but doing their part as well and trying to make, housing a priority.
Okay, perfect, Dave.
There's lots of cities out there that are doing it right. I'll pick on a few: Ontario, Tustin, Menifee, Fountain Valley, Huntington Beach. We just saw the approvals in Huntington Beach a couple of weeks ago. Buena Park, and Stanton. We have a new community in Stanton, and they really rolled out the red carpet to get our entitlements done quickly and get us in the ground as quick as possible. So the leadership there has done a really nice job of figuring out how we can work together. Transparency is a huge issue. I think Mike brought it up earlier. It's just that alignment. So we just need to get aligned with our local agencies early on, the importance of providing housing and the importance of getting through the process as quickly as possible so we can get in the ground. There's been a lot of great leadership at the SCAG level as well, and so we need to figure out ways to get aligned there, because I think this is probably going to lead into your next question is how are we going to deal with the 1.4 million housing units that SCAG is requiring in the next 8 years, and I think we got to set some expectations there as well.
Yeah, Dave, thank you. You did touch on the next topic, which is going to be RHNA. So there's a lot of elected officials watching this today, and one of the big topics that they must face is the RHNA process, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment process. And for those of you that don't know, RHNA requires local jurisdictions to zone for a certain number of units that are then given to the region, which then go down to the local cities. And so Orange County is required to zone for about 183,000 units over the next 10 years, the sixth RHNA cycle. And as it was kind of stated earlier, Orange County may do about 10,000 permits a year. And so it will be a difficult task at our current speed. And on top of that, the state is looking to start cracking down on cities that are failing to meet these numbers. And so this panel is a panel that actually builds those units. They're not the ones zoning for them; they're the ones who actually build them. And so, I guess my question to this panel, which this could be its own program, if you will, focusing just on RHNA. But will this actually create units? This staggering number required by the state of California, with a lot of them needing to be affordable. And then on top of that, as we've discussed multiple times, land is somewhat lacking here in Orange County. And so will this be creating more units? And then what will the future look like? What will these units look like? And we'll start with Dave, maybe just kind of on your overall thoughts as well.
Yeah, it's a daunting number, 183,000, which includes all the 33 cities in Orange County plus unincorporated Orange County. Simple math on that is 23,000 and change per year. It's been a long time since we've done that. As Mike mentioned, we're kind of hovering around 10,000 a year. Although I think we were a little bit less last year because we took a pause. But I think the important point is just trying, and that it's a tailwind, and if there are policy directives coming down from Sacramento on production of housing, then there should be some tools in the toolbox, hopefully, that the state can help provide these local cities and developers to help produce. Can we get there? Can we get to 183,000 in the next 8 years? Probably not, but it would be great to be able to tell a story, in year 8 that, we didn't get all the way there, but here's what we did do. And so I think we owe it to ourselves and owe it to, the state to really put in, I guess, the old college try, right?
Perfect. Eric.
Yeah. So, my math says that we have about 64% of the required units, the allocated units under RHNA in South Orange County specifically are going to have to be affordable. So that really is going to put a lot of pressure on organizations like Laura's group, certainly on the market rate developers. You know, we're all trying to figure out a way to build more attainable and more affordable, but without subsidies, it becomes quite a tricky proposition. You know, the buyer pool out there is huge when you start to look at attainable levels. And I think everybody on this call, including myself, would tell you that if we could figure out a way to build housing that was attainable with the current system, we would be doing it, and we would build ourselves out of this thing really, really quickly. One thing I know about builders is if we can build it, we will. And but there are definitely, you know, things getting in the way. There's you know, the lack of land, for instance. You know, South Orange County is fairly well built out. We do have, you know, a great big piece of land, and you know, Mike's group holding on to, and will certainly help in relieving some of the housing pressure in South Orange County. But the way the state looks at it is they look at each individual city, and those cities are going to have to come up with some really unique solutions. I think the great thing about what we're about to go through is it's going to create an open dialogue about what works and what doesn't, and hopefully give everybody an opportunity to, you know, provide input and maybe shape the way housing is built in the future.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, Mike, over to you.
Well, the RHNA issue is really a challenging one. You know, in our case, 75% of our land is going to be permanently preserved as open space as part of our original entitlements. That's 17,000 acres. So right off the top, we don't have, you know, an unlimited amount of land to be able to try to help solve. And also, our units were already in the RHNA projection from past cycles. So what happened this time, the county received an increased RHNA goal of 10,000 homes. That's in addition to anything that was already entitled, like the ranch plan. So it's going to be really challenging for the county as an agency to find a way to achieve that. I think, you know, what Dave's encouragement earlier was on point. I think that, you know, the cities, I think, needed, and the county needed a little bit of a tougher goal. But you know, we have to have some reality in these things as well. And I think that's why you've seen some frustration from the local agencies that, you know, because as I've been saying all the way through this presentation, you've got to plan for the infrastructure. You've got to deal with all the issues that you would address in a normal greenfield context to accommodate new housing. So I'm optimistic, though. I think we can do better, and I think the state of California, we have to do better.
Okay, good. And Laura, we'll end with you, and then we'll take some audience questions.
Great. Yeah, I do think that it is an exciting time to be working with our city partners as they take on this challenge to zone for this tremendous number of units. And yeah, there's a good chunk of those units that need to be affordable, but will it all get built? I don't know that it will all get built, but at least taking a try to find the space, to look at creative reuse of sites and you know, get that zoning in place. I also believe and am seeing right now, just because of the amount of work we have at Jamboree, that funding sources coming out of the state. And I know they're really looking at trying to fill that missing middle. So somewhere between probably what most of you are building on the panel and most of what we're building at Jamboree, right? So people who are maybe in the 60 to 120 AMI space. And that could be huge for Orange County. So as more funding comes to the table, it's extremely important that we have sites that have been identified, that the zoning's there, that we can move quickly to get those units built. And I think, you know, as Dave said, we owe it to the state to give it a try, but we owe it to our residents and our future residents and our kids to give it a try.
I love the optimism. Thank you, everyone, for answering that question. I know it's a tough one, and I know that there's a lot more time what we could have spent on RHNA, being that it is one of the biggest issues right now, not in the state of California, but of course in Orange County specifically. So we do have some audience questions, and kind of back even to the issue of RHNA. And this one's aimed, it looks like at Eric, and I know, Eric, you're not just a builder, but you're also on the Planning Commission. You are active in policy. And so this is kind of focused on RENA policy, but for decades, it seems that nothing has really come of RENA. So local jurisdictions get the numbers, but nothing really happens, and cities don't even get close to zoning the units. And so what role is the government going to play in terms of kind of a carrot and stick approach, but the stick? What kind of punishments could cities face if they don't hit these numbers?
Well, I mean, if you see it in some of the legislation, you see legislation like SB 35, which sort of green lighted almost anything that was allowed. I think if the state removed some of the strings that were attached to that type of legislation, you would see, you might see cities responding, but I would probably the idea that RENA is effective. It's been around for, since 1956. And we're now standing here with, a huge amount of housing, but having to do with the fifth cycle and not putting enough in the fifth cycle due to, the rebound from the meltdown in 2006 to 8. And housing is so dynamic. It's reactive to so many different things that the idea that you could say we're going to be able to do this in 8 years, and in this allocation basis that doesn't look at the reality of the land that they're out is fraught with problems. And I think that's why you see a lot of the local jurisdictions wincing when they're faced with these numbers that, mean, in some cases like Lake Forest, 17% of their land in their city is going to have to be zoned for housing based on the numbers. That's a lot of land in a city that's getting close to built out as well. So you just, the numbers are scary. But again, I think, great, Mike and Dave mentioned, great tailwind, and it's going to force policymakers and people like myself who sit on a planning commission to really get creative and try to figure out ways to zone appropriately for housing in the future.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Okay, last question here from the audience. Looks like it's aimed at Dave. What impact, and anyone else can take this, actually. It would kind of be interesting to hear from all of you. But what impact has COVID-19 played in your market over the last year? And I'll actually open it up to everybody, and I'll start with Dave.
Well, maybe I'll defer that question to Mike and Laura and just comment on the last one, which is, nobody really knows what the stick is going to be. And actually, if it was up to me, I would prefer that there wouldn't be a stick. And that there would be some incentive. So if you're making progress towards your RENA numbers, what's the incentive for a city to do that? Would they get, 5%, more, funding for transportation or parks or something along those lines, where instead of enacting a penalty, you throw in an incentive that makes them work a little harder for it. So. And I'll defer that second question over to Mike and to Laura.
Okay, sounds good. Well, then I guess we'll go with we'll start with Mike. So, how has COVID affected your business this year?
Well, it was transformative. At the beginning of 2020, all of the builders that were building within Rancho Mission Viejo had to change over to a virtual sales platform, and it was something that they had been sort of toying with or gradually working towards in years prior, but the pandemic forced everybody to learn how to do it in real time. Incredibly, they all kind of did a great job. And we're very thankful for the sales success that we've continued to have at Rancho Mission Viejo. And I think some of those changes are never going back. I mean, we still expect to see model homes and field sales offices, but I know the builders are all looking at how can they do it as efficiently as possible going forward, and also how they market to the new buyers. All of the technology and data around that today is completely different than it was 5 or 10 years ago, and the pandemic sort of accelerated that. How do you market to the next generation of home buyers who are much more tech savvy and comfortable doing things online? So those were two big things. And I mentioned earlier the traffic benefit. We know that approximately 70% of the residents on the ranch are working remotely at this time. that's a huge relief on the local traffic network. So
interesting. Laura, to you, and then we'll end with Eric.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I know we're getting tight on time. I would just say at Jamboree, the pandemic turned everything upside down. From on the development side, our new construction continued on, but did slow down a bit just because we were having trouble getting people out for inspections, banks out, moving projects along, meeting all the COVID safety requirements. Thankfully, we were considered essential workers, so we could continue on. On the rehab side, we had some acquisition rehab projects. We really couldn't relocate our residents to do the inside of the unit work, so we put some of those on hold. On our existing, we have 20,000 Californians that live in our properties. We work very closely to get people on unemployment and ensure that they could pay their rent, get them signed up for rental assistance if needed, and whatever other kind of support we could give them. We have 35 after-school learning centers. Those all went virtual. And then we implemented a food delivery program with tons of food being delivered to our property. So COVID was huge for us. We increased our workforce by 20% to try to respond to it, but we're still running around like crazy.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Eric, we'll end with you.
Yeah, COVID's, Mike touched on it, but our sales process has completely shifted from in-person to an online, or now we have, combo, depending on the project and its location. So that's certainly, technology has been really an asset, I think, from my perspective. One of the other things it's done is it's really opened the door and the idea to more virtual community meetings. So from an outreach process,
sure.
A lot of what we used to literally go around and door knock, and then try to have community meetings where people have to come out, at night, to meet with us. We don't get a lot of people showing up because people are busy and they've got families to feed, to get for bed and stuff. A really nice change in the way we're doing our outreach and this ability to really touch base with a lot of community members and be more transparent than we've ever been able to be. So that's been one of the huge wins, I think, out of all of this. As much as we probably are all getting sick and tired of Zoom calls and virtual meetings, I much rather have a virtual meeting with a developer than have to go to some community meeting, and not be sitting on my couch while I do it. So it's been great.
Okay.
Wait, Steve, can I footnote that one second? In that, I just would like to say that he really hit the nail on the head, Eric. That these community meetings, and we've been doing a lot of them via technology. Hosting up to 100 people. They seem much more relaxed when they're at home with their feet up on the couch. They can grab a glass of wine or whatever they're having. People are very polite. The raise your hand feature comes up. They raise their hand. We call on them. Then they go back on mute. It's really working out well, and I think that aspect of community outreach, we may not, when post-COVID is here, we won't do every one of those via technology, but we might do maybe 50% of them. And so I think that aspect's here to stay. It's been very effective. Really good point, Eric.
All right, and that is all we have for today. I want to thank our guests for joining us. We appreciate your input and your perspective on this important issue that is critical to the economic growth of South Orange County. And I want to thank you, our viewers, for joining us as well. Please plan to join us again in a few weeks on March 12th for our annual South Orange County Economic Report, brought to you by our title sponsor, UCI and UCI Health. We'll hear from Dr. Christopher Thornburg, a nationally renowned economist and founding partner of Beacon Economics. He'll dive into a look back at 2020, but more importantly, a look forward to 2021 and beyond, to see what our economic future in South Orange County looks like as we emerge from this global pandemic. So mark your calendars now for 11 a.m. on Friday, March 12th for the 2021 South Orange County Economic Report. I'm Steve Lamont. Thank you for joining us today.